A key thing we figured out, a key insight we learned over the past year, but this is something that has always been behind our thoughts, was the challenge for distributed systems is not technology, it's the experience. Aligned with the principles of the internet, how internet began, you don't need anybody's permission to go to a website or host a website. Aligned with those core foundational principles internet has been built, we built a computation network for the future. We believe the foundation should be scalable, frictionless, and free of censorship. And we believe in the unstoppable web. And what we're doing is, with Akash, is essentially creating a new operating system for the internet. And how we are doing that is by tapping into unused 85% capacity in 8.2 million data center that complements someone's cloud. And Akash is essentially a peer-to-peer network of computation clusters designed for global first applications, planetary scale applications.
Welcome to Tech Post. I'm your host, Trent Lipinski. In this episode, I review Greg Osuri. He's the CEO and founder of Overclock Labs and Akash Network. And in this episode, we discuss his new operating system for running a decentralized cloud network. In this episode, we discuss entrepreneurship, what it takes to create and launch a new product, and talk about cryptocurrency, the crypto market at large, and what it takes to create and launch a company in this new space, in this emerging market of the decentralized internet. This is an amazing episode, so please stay tuned. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Greg Osuri. Tell us a bit about who you are and what you're working on.
Thanks, Trent. Great to be here. I am the CEO of Overclock Labs. At Overclock Labs, we are the creators of Akash, and we absolutely believe that software is eating the world, and the developer is at the epicenter of this revolution. And we're built, and everything we do at Overclock is centered around making this builder successful. Every feature we think about, every design choice we make, every roadmap we plan is centered around the prosperity of the developer. And we built Akash Network as a mere manifestation of these core beliefs. Another core belief we have is the ability to innovate on the internet should be accessible to all. We believe the foundation should be scalable, frictionless, and free of censorship. And we believe in the unstoppable web. And what we're doing is, with Akash, is essentially creating a new operating system for the internet. And how we are doing that is by tapping into unused 85% capacity in 8.2 million data center that complements someone's cloud. And Akash is essentially a peer-to-peer network of computation clusters designed for global first applications, planetary scale applications. And with the massive distribution that we get with the permission model that we adopted for providers to sell services and for users to consume these computation services without needing anybody's permission, without any censorship, direct, without a middleman. Aligned with the principles of the internet, how internet began, you don't need anybody's permission to go to a website or host a website. Aligned with those core foundational principles internet has been built, we built a computation network for the future.
Awesome. Yeah, so you and I have talked previously. I actually interviewed you on my previous podcast, and I definitely recommend going and checking out that episode if you haven't seen it yet. But I'd love to kind of focus this episode on kind of an update of where you're at, what you guys have experienced over the last year since we last talked, and kind of feel out where this space is, because it's like 2019 where we're at right now compared to where we were when I first interviewed you. I mean, it may as well be a lifetime ago, but it also may as well be yesterday. So
Yes.
it's time seems to be moving at different speeds these days. Can you tell us a bit about the progress you've been making and some of the things you've experienced over the last year?
Yes. Over the last year, we built and shipped Akash network to the hands of our users. What I'm really excited about is the kind of adoption we got. And I think the secret to this adoption is not because what we do, is because why we do it, right? Mm-hmm. Because by placing the developer in the center of everything we do, our products naturally progress to optimize for love from the developers. When you use Akash command line, what you'll immediately notice is that this command line was designed for you. It speaks to you, right? And so we have incredible applications, both blockchain and non-blockchain applications. We entered into a strategic partnership with Coil, Ripple's subsidiary, to bring forth interoperability to the internet. Mm-hmm. And also we will be soon running the entire payment network that is supposedly the future of frictionless payments or permissionless payments. We made headways in several other blockchain based products because they align with us when it comes to building products for developers, right? And the ones that I'm most proud of are companies that haven't really thought about blockchain, but after looking at Akash, they are thriving. One of the companies is Cactus application. So Cactus is a peer-to-peer music streaming service that essentially streams music directly from someone's computer to your phone for free. And so if you're a music fan like me, I have, over time I collected about 40,000 tracks, and some of these tracks were when I was 18 or 17, mm-hmm. right? So all this great music collection that I have, I want to access that music directly from a computer without paying somebody in the middle, right? So I love Cactus. But the challenge Cactus had was the reliability in traffic, because coming directly from a computer is not necessarily reliable because that depends on a home network. So they have to use a relay-based architecture at the edge. Mm-hmm. And cloud wasn't quite cutting it for them in terms of performance, because cloud is optimized for hyperscale, less high-density data centers. But Akash doesn't have that limitation. Akash is optimized for global scale, for thousands of nodes. So by using Akash, they could get their cost down. I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, I think it's 4x or 5x than what they would otherwise pay on the cloud, with about 40 times more distribution than the cloud.
That's amazing.
And that's not the most exciting part. The most exciting part is what they have in the future, right? So, a peer-to-peer music service relies on a computer to stream. And in this age of mobile, where our computers are moving from desktops to laptops, your computer is not on all the time. So mm-hmm. that's a limitation. So they want to shift to a hardware model where you have a dedicated hardware device in your house as a music center that hosts all your music. And if you're a photographer or an artist like me, I have tons and tons of large size files, and I can't really store in the cloud because it gets really expensive. So for someone like me, I need a large, reliable hard disk that hosts my creative files. So Cactus wants to build that, but as you know, hardware is expensive, and they found a solution with Akash. And the solution happens to be so that this device sits in your house and becomes part of the Akash node network, by which the rewards, that this particular node gains by hosting other workloads through Akash will subsidize the cost for the hardware.
Yeah.
So they've cleverly did a beautiful economic model where they can bring the cost of the hardware device to almost free, and free in the sense the customer is paying for electricity, and it's that type of redistribution of incentives that's only possible because of a distributed and decentralized cloud like Akash. And this is the true promise of blockchains, right? Blockchain, when we talk about Web3, when we talk about the future infrastructure of internet, the internet has to work for everybody. In this case, a music streaming app, which has nothing to do with blockchain, whatsoever, is a benefactor by a peer-to-peer economy. I like to see those kind of applications because that speaks volumes to the mission that all of us shared in the decentralized community.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a perfect use case. And I think for the listener, that really demonstrates the power of where decentralization can lead. I mean, as you said, man, they're saving money on their cloud hosting costs. They've got a more reliable network, and now they're able to innovate and do things that they couldn't have done before. And, this is on the precipice of a centralized internet that right now is facing so many challenges. We're facing censorship, we're facing conglomerization of these major tech companies, we're facing monopolies, we're facing all this kind of infighting that's happening geopolitically right now. The ultimate solution is we have to decentralize. We have to stop relying on these major centralized networks. And you're essentially creating the recipe and the solution that people need to, in the infrastructure they're going to need to be able to build these solutions on.
Absolutely. And I think a key thing we figured out, a key insight we learned over the past year, but this is something that has always been behind our thoughts, was the challenge for distributed systems is not technology, it's the experience, right? And this is very visible, especially when it comes to blockchain-based decentralized technologies. The user almost is not at the center of what we do. So by taking a different approach, by taking an approach that involves user, solves the adoption problem. And I think that's how we're going to win. We're not going to win by simply overstating the mission, but we're going to win by aligning our actions to our mission. And we absolutely should never forget that builders are at the center of our society. I mean, this is a tradition that goes back to our primate ancestors when a builder changed the course of humanity when they realized you can put a stick and a stone together that makes the prey the predator. The hunted became the hunter because they figured out by building a tool, we can overcome God-given limitations. And change the nature of the builder was at the center of humanity to thrive. And by putting that builder, but continuing that sacred tradition is how we're going to win.
And you've been going through a little bit of, some personal development as well. I mean, since the last time I interviewed you, you're much more grounded. You seem to kind of have a glow to you. What's been going on in your own life that's kind of helped you through this experience and, launching a startup and all the stress of that and then being able to get through that?
Yes, entrepreneurship is extremely hard. And unless you're passionate about what you do, it is you're not going to succeed. But the challenge, the trap us entrepreneurs fall under is by being tunnel focused, and we miss out everything else. And I think every entrepreneur, every successful entrepreneur you speak to, including Bill Gates, they all say the same thing. And I've realized if you find a hobby that you enjoy as much as you enjoy your work, it significantly improves your quality of life. And for me, that was art. As a cartoonist, I love people. I love listening to people. And I started, I used to take a lot of pictures just to understand the character of people so I can draw them. And naturally, I found a love for photography. And what photography made me is to really taught me how to listen with my eyes, right? It opened up this new sensory input to listen. And as an entrepreneur, being able to listen is the number one quality, I believe. And photography or art makes you a better listener. And my goal with photography is to bring humans at their element and capture that. Because for me, when I meet people, I don't necessarily care what they're bad at. I want to know what you're good at so I can align myself with those things that you're good at. And I think most of us want to see the best in people. And when you're good at something, when you're passionate about something, the way your eyes lit up, the way you talk about it, you're in your element. And I wanted to capture that. I wanted to capture that because that will be the best photo you'll ever get. And as you learn, so I don't take pictures of random headshots.
No wedding photos?
No events, no headshots, none of that stuff. I only photograph what inspires me, what drives me, right? Sometimes that's nature, sometimes that's people. And my goal is to become a better storyteller, and you do that by listening. And I think it naturally kind of aligned with my work because now it opened up so many doors that were not previously open to me because a few things, I think number one, people understood my values and my mission with art, and people want to be part of this journey, right? So I started taking pictures of incredible people that I surround myself every day, inspiring people that I meet every day. And those pictures started speaking volumes about themselves. They saw things that they never saw, something about themselves. And the most important thing in business is listening to customers. Now when I meet developers, I just started a new project called Faces of Silicon Valley because I felt we as a society are not doing enough to celebrate the builder, the unsung heroes behind startup companies. All the founders and the public-facing individuals get all the glory, but the unsung heroes, the people that actually do the work, don't get enough glory. I wanted to tell their stories, and I wanted to bring the human behind the inventor. And I embarked on a art series. It's a humongous project. We are interviewing about 600 developers. And since my process involves knowing somebody before capturing them, so I have to spend time with each one of them. In this, I listen and I understand where they come from, understand what drives them, understand their challenges, and what do you need to build a good product. That understanding. And I think not to commercialize my values, but I think you naturally find alignment in everything you do if you have these core set of values. And I think photography or economics or cartooning or building infrastructure projects are always centered around that person that I'm building for.
And I mean, art is ultimately, it comes down to art and artistic direction. And there is an artistic element to coding. I mean, many people compare it, and it's been compared to poetry. A good programmer and a good coder is essentially a poet. They're manipulating language and they're manipulating words to create outcomes. It's often behind a computer and the average user doesn't actually see what's executing in the background. But, a good programmer has spent the time and effort to create a structure and how they write their code to achieve a certain result. And it's a form of art. So it really doesn't surprise me that, you getting into other forms of art has helped kind of open your awareness to bringing those same processes to your products, to your services, and to the things that you're doing on the technical side as well.
Yeah. So, if you define art as a medium of self-expression, and a code is a medium of self-expression, right? And I think it was Einstein who said all great scientists are artists as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a study done on this, and I think there was a survey for Nobel laureates, and I think over 40% of them had a creative outlet besides their primary job. And another interesting thing, I think photography contributed to this realization for us. I've been programming for 25 years, right? And I don't remember the time I didn't program. And when we're building products, especially the notion that you have to make everything simple is fundamentally wrong, right? And I realized this essentially because I shoot on a film camera. I shoot on a camera that was built in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
There are no electronics in this camera. Everything is analog, everything is mechanical, but it produces incredible pictures. Every Time magazine cover is shot on this camera till date. But it's extremely hard. It goes against everything about, building products. The products has to be simple and whatnot, right? So, and in my programming career, I use tools that are extremely hard to use. I use Vim every day. Vim is one of those tools. If you use it for the first time, try getting it out. Try quitting. Yeah. If you do it successfully, you're not human. So I use incredibly hard products because love, and there are products that are super simple to use. I don't, right? And I started questioning, what is the metric? What is the framework we need to adopt to build products? Is it simplicity? Obviously not. Turns out the answer is cognitive coefficiency.
Define that.
And this is a term I coined. Cognitive coefficiency is essentially the ratio between value delivered to a cognitive tax. So what that means is, if you're a programmer, you're a builder, last time you picked up a tool, you heard about a tool, your friend told you about it, or you found it from the internet, you go download the tool and you run it, right? You try to be intuitive, right? Because the tool is supposed to do something, and you type the command, and because you think that's how the tool should be used. Two things happen. One of two things could happen at that moment. One thing is the tool could succeed. Fantastic. Value has been delivered, captured, beautiful. You're going to come back and use the tool again. But more often than not, it fails, especially infrastructure tools. Mm-hmm. It fails not because it's broken product. Most often than not, it fails because the user did not know they have to input something that required input. Yeah. Right? It is a delta in knowledge that the tool failed, right? Now, when the tool fails, the user makes a very important decision. consciously or not. And the decision is the value delivered greater than the cognitive tax? Should I go back and read the manual? Should I go to Stack Overflow and pay this cognitive tax to learn, is a value greater than the cognitive tax, right?
You're describing my experience as an entrepreneur right now. It's always, do I want to cross this delta? It's always the question for anything that that comes up that's new that I don't know yet.
Right. So if the ratio is 1, I do it. As long as the ratio is 1, I do it, because the tax increases. At one point, you're going to come to a point that it is not worth it, and you drop, right? So one thing that taught us is, well, delivering value is extremely hard because value is nonlinear. You can't quantify it, right? Everybody sees value differently. And so delivering value is, when it's nonlinear, how do you measure? So instead of measuring value, how about reduce cognitive tax, right? So in Akash, for example, we introduced something called fail forgiveness. So what that means is, in order to deploy a workload on Akash, you got to type Akash deploy, and a manifest file, provide the key and whatnot. In case you forgot to provide the manifest file, or you forgot the key, Akash will ask you, hey, we detected a key in your local cache. Would you like to use it? Hey, we detected a manifest file in your local folder. Would you like to use it? Right? So Akash, that happens only in interactive mode. Akash command line also supports programmable modes, such as JSON and shell outputs. And JSON output obviously is designed to make the command line extensive and has much stricter syntax and grammatical rules. Similarity with shell command line. But if you are in interactive mode, which is by default designed for humans, you're going to find Akash command line extremely easy to use and delightful, because in the aesthetics we put in, we understood that command lines are scary, you look at, because they over inform a user. They miss out the important things and give you things in a very linear fashion, right? And if you look at my history of all the work on my GitHub, my open source work, I've consistently had libraries that gain massive adoption. I think my first library had 1,200 stars and 700. And in my co-founder, Adams, we have highly adopted tooling because my tools improve the command aesthetic of a command line. It's been adopted by Kubernetes, and my favorite is Mitch Hashimoto, who's the founder of HashiCorp, who created Terraform. And if I have to, think of another person that focuses on developer experience, I think Hashimoto would be. And him using my tools is just a testament to having the builder in the middle of everything we do. All these values just align, and they just magically merge into everything we do, right? So fail forgiveness is a novel concept we introduced with Akash command line. And another thing we're extremely thoughtful is about growth gratification. It's another term I coined. Growth gratification is the consistent gratification you gain from growing in a certain field, right? To give you the best analogy would be photography. There's a million ways to take a picture. There are a million ways to use a camera. It's undeterministic, right? And if you're too deterministic about your product, you miss out on the undeterministic part, and you end up designing products that are very limiting, right? So every time we look at platforms, why we love a certain platform is because, yes, they may perform the primary function for you. Like take a film camera and get the technicals right, get the exposure right, and take a picture, get it developed. And I can get from like bad to good by following certain technicals, and the gratification you get from being bad to good is immense. And now the next challenge is getting good to great, right? I think platforms should be designed around growth gratification. That means making decisions when it comes to design as to how many primitives we have in the core system and how many workflows we have, right? Primitives and workflows are these things that are kind of related because workflows are built on primitives, right? And really thinking in those terms, was derived from my passion for art and being observant and being a good listener. And I think entrepreneurs, when they find that passion, I think it just significantly improves everything around you. And I think specialization is also a myth, and people say that you in order to be successful, you got to be doing one thing only. It's a myth because greatest luminaries like Leonardo da Vinci or Einstein always had a creative outlets, and always they were good at two things, or maybe sometimes more. And you start questioning all the popular biases, And I think when people ask me, I think it was Peter Thiel, he always asks the question, like, what is the one belief that is not popular? And one of those beliefs for me is specialization is a myth.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to specialization, I've almost seen it as a downfall in some regards. I mean, I see so many people who over specialize in one thing that they just completely miss out on everything else. And I think I just saw a quote the other day. I think it was actually a Steve Jobs quote. He was talking about people in Silicon Valley, and he was saying the problem with a lot of these people that over specialize is the number of dots and experiences that they have to be able to connect is there's just not enough dots there to make a connection, because without those other experiences, without trying things that you're not specialized in and things that you're not good at, and without getting that extra experience, you don't have the dots to connect to be able to find those extra things that are going to help make a better product. Because when I'm listening to you, what I hear is, ultimately your intention for doing this is to create a product that's usable by these developers so that they can achieve whatever their intention is. And it's so difficult to do that because you don't know what they're going to create with your tool. You're just trying to create the best tool for them to create with, which is such a challenge because the possibilities are endless and there are use cases that you can't even comprehend and that you haven't even thought of yet. So to build a tool for that person is, an incredibly difficult task.
Yes, it's daunting and difficult, but if you listen, it gets easier, right? Mm-hmm. So intention, Akash and Overclock's mission is to build tools to make the builder more successful, developer more successful. But photography and art, using art and photography contributes that to the intention without intending. Mm-hmm. So, just the sheer value, the sheer power it gives you to listen and express what you listen is how we build products. And I think Apple is a great example because they understood that, right? So Apple is one of those companies.
I like how you past tense that.
Yes, sadly I am.
I'm with you.
Sadly, the $1,000 monitor stand just didn't sing with me. It just reminded me that they lost their way so much. And it was never the case from the beginning. Apple was always, I bought Apple products for me, right? Mm-hmm. The messaging has always been, when you look at why people make decisions, it's not rational that derives decisions. It is the inner brain, there, right? People don't buy because of what you're selling. People buy because why you're selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like if Apple would, carry themselves by saying that we make beautiful computers, we make them easy to use, we make them fast. Would you like to buy one? I don't think Apple would succeed, but Apple starts off by saying that we believe in changing the status quo, right?
Yeah.
We believe, everything we do needs to push the humanity forward. And we just happen to make a computer. Would you like to buy one, right?
Yeah.
So Martin Luther King didn't go and say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream.
Yeah.
Right? I think having those core beliefs are very, very important to a company because, when things are great, You can raise all the money, you can, do all the great things. But unless you have a team that believes in what you do, you're bound for greatness. And I learned this 3 years into entrepreneurship, Overclock Labs, make several mistakes, and finally realizing that what drives people is that shared, untethered devotion to common set of beliefs. And that's what we wake up every day. And then you realize when everything you do is that core belief, it is not the number of hours you put in, it is every hour that you put in is more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's been a significant contributor to my personal growth over the last 1 year.
And just going back to the Apple thing, just one last second there, but it's interesting because Johnny Ive just left Apple, so he was the chief, design. I don't even know what title he was going for at the end there, but he was their chief designer, and he did lose that passion, and you can kind of see that in what Apple's products have been over the last few years. And now, it's ultimately ended with him leaving the company. I'm hopeful that there will be a new generation of designers that can potentially, take his place and get Apple back on the right track. But, it speaks to what you were just talking about of, finding that passion and making sure that you keep that passion and having that balance that we've been talking about throughout this entire episode. Because I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is having that creative balance to kind of create a more round builder, a more round individual who's creating a round product that has a number of use cases that can do these things. Because we've had a lack of vision in Silicon Valley over the last probably 5, 6, 7 years, maybe a little longer. And I really love that, we've been talking about all of this stuff, but, at the end of the day, it's, you're building something that you're passionate about, and it's leading to this decentralized future, and it's creating a decentralized possibility that just didn't exist 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now, you've executed it. Like, the code's out there. You've got people building on it. You're getting that positive feedback. You're seeing these things become real. Can you talk about like what it's like to actually see this thing come alive and see developers starting to use your code and create with it?
Oh, I get chills when I see people use it, especially people try it for the first time and they tear out because they suddenly found something that speaks to them, suddenly found something that finally gets them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me to see that is just, something I want to do every day. There's nothing that feeling cannot be replaced by anything. I tear up when I see that, and it just reminds me we're just getting started, right? If we have users that absolutely love the product And that is what is going to, accelerate our mission. That is what is going to get us to the next step, right? And people are coming up to me wanting to write new features for Akash. People that don't work with us because they're inspired and they want to contribute to the success of Akash as a shared mission, right? And the challenge, of course, is as a company grows, how do we maintain that core customer focus, that core focus on the builder? And that's the culture I want to build at Overclock and Akash. And that is going to be extremely difficult, because hiring the right type of people, building the team, and expanding. Fortunately, we're also the next big steps for us, obviously, is to provide the liquidity for a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So Akash, as you know, is a peer-to-peer self-sustaining ecosystem. And the most important thing for self-sustainability is capitalization, liquidity, right? And one of the reasons for the Akash tokenized computing asset is to provide the sustainability, because the blockchain functions on consensus of different individuals, and the incentives have to be aligned, in a manner to support their initiatives, because they have to pay bills as well. So we are very, very excited to introduce our economics white paper. It's completely redesigned from ground up. One of the things it addresses is how staking results directly in providing the necessary liquidity and providing the necessary value for this asset. And because, again, for liquidity, the most important thing is investors. And when you talk to investors, it's, you have to be aligned with their goals as well when it comes to return of investment and whatnot. So we designed the economics in a manner that with higher demand, higher usage for the system, the value of the token significantly increases, which in turn increases the value of the ecosystem, which further feeds into more adoption. So it's a cycle of adoption and value creation, right? Now, as a business, we need to capture some of the value. And because Akash is completely independent, I'm really excited about the stuff we're doing at Overclock Labs to capture value. Obviously, I cannot talk about it publicly, but a business model aligns so well with our network, right? And one of the challenges when you build network-based businesses is priorities, right? So as an economist, I think every economist's dream would be to create a marketplace that has perfect competition. So the term perfect competition means no one in the marketplace has an upper hand than the other. So commodities and things of that nature become are considered perfect competition. A perfect competition is no individual player has a significant advantage with the other player, and everybody exchanges goods and services in a perfect manner. Whereas companies optimize against it. Companies like monopolies, right? Companies want to be the only provider because that's how they make money, right? So when you have a company like Overclock Labs, and when you have a network like Akash Network, they have different priorities. And I think the magic relies on how do you bridge that gap, right? How do we create a business model that is not the same thing that we have experienced so far in terms of censorship, in terms of greed, in terms of all the bad things that we experience today in capitalistic world. How can we build a company that is aligned with the goals of society, as well as aligned as well as aligned with the goals of shareholders, right? So
when you figure it out, let me know, because this is quite the challenge that I think a lot of blockchain companies and people that are experimenting with cryptocurrencies and different economic models is how do you create that balance between, doing the right thing and still achieving economic success? And what is economic success defined as? Is it stockpiling money and becoming a monopoly like Google, or is it doing the greatest amount of good for the most amount of people and making enough money to sustain itself?
I like the Apple model. I love Google, but I think I like the Apple model
Selling
better.
tools as a product to the consumer, to the person, and versus, trying to achieve total complete like market dominance and just selling a very specific tool to a very specific person. Is that what you're referring to? Or
No, I think market dominance has nothing to do with values of the company, right? Platforms is a winner-take-all market.
mm-hmm.
And, there is no place for the second person. It doesn't work that way. When you enter a market, you want to absolutely dominate, and you want to do it because you want the values you want your values that align with industry to take precedence over people with greed. We're on a mission because we want to make the world a better place. And money is something that just comes, and money is abstraction of value, and the more value we capture, the abstraction is going to happen. You can have high margins. There's nothing wrong with making money,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to be aligned with your core values, right? So I think we cracked the code when it comes to tokenized business models. And this is something I've been thinking about for quite a long time. If you look at open source business models, there are essentially three business models, right? The first business model, the most common one, is what we call support model, which Red Hat would be the biggest company that builds an entire business by supporting something that's extremely complicated, that's Linux,
Mm-hmm.
right? Linux is fully open source, is still fully open source. And the fact that for enterprise to adopt, you need someone to pick up the phone. Red Hat obviously saw a niche in the market and they capitalized on it. Great. A second type of business model, which is more common these days, is open core business model. So the core of the software is open source, but you build additional features on top of this core that address either usability, either value creation or whatnot. And a best example would be GitHub, right?
Mm-hmm.
Git is open source and free, created by Linux Store Walls, but GitHub added collaborative features, the push and pull and whatnot. I mean, before GitHub, there was no forking, there was none of that cool little features. And
there's a social element to it now.
The social programming element to it. If you look at Spark, Databricks makes Spark, right? Spark is a beautiful real-time analytics engine. Almost all AI and machine learning folks rely on. And Databricks obviously built a beautiful UI and other things. Another friend of mine is doing a fantastic job at Kong. Kong is API gateway, free and open source. And we're supporting them at Akash, but they have an enterprise version. So that is called an open core model. Extremely successful. These companies are creating billions of dollars of market capitalization. Is something to really look at if you're an investor. And third type of business model, which is I think we're all trying to figure out, is tokenized business model.
Mm-hmm.
How can we create a high-growing company in an open source environment where not only your source code is open, but your data is open as well. It's open data, right? And while taking advantage of this tokenized asset, right? So, I would love to talk about a business strategy, but unfortunately I can't. And but I think it'll be evident very, very, very soon as to what that looks like at the end, what that business model looks like. I'm super excited, actually.
I'm definitely
In
curious to see when you bring this to market because it's the challenge of the entire crypto blockchain space is who's going to crack that model, and the person or the company that does is going to be wildly successful. I mean, you could make some arguments. Ethereum has probably been the most successful so far. You've got Ripple and a couple others, but we still haven't seen that, I don't know, market adoption, especially on the user side, where it's like, okay, like there's actually people on this platform using this product that's actually creating this tokenized economy that's working, and all the parties involved are benefiting from it. Right now, there's still so much speculation in the market, and there's many challenges to overcome that at least I haven't seen it cracked quite yet. But I feel like we're close.
Right. The biggest challenge when you're trying to build a business model on a marketplace is how do you align features and what features belong where, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer to the question really comes down to your audience and your user, right? I was talking about, to give you the best example, let's put it this way, cameras, right? Again, love cameras.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a camera and you can build a beautiful camera. And camera is a platform because you can do so many things. You can attach lenses, you can attach flashes, you can do different films, you can do all kinds of things. It's a platform. You can build your camera the way you want it. You can put different types of lenses, or you can put different types of films. Like Fujifilm is a company that makes film, but they also make cameras, right? The other companies that make film as well. It's ultimately the user's choice as to what kind of film I want to choose to get the result I want to get, right? There's nothing, I mean, Fujifilm is, of course, building the camera, but it's also building the film. And they build a platform and they build the things that make the platform. They build lenses. Same thing with Kodak, right? They're just examples how you can build industries and capture value that aligns with the industry.
Kodak did launch a cryptocurrency.
Of course, it's sad. It's really sad to see Kodak. They don't have the same owners that they had. Polaroid is one of my favorite things, and it's really sad stories. But these beautiful films I still love from Polaroid are not available anymore. Mm-hmm. I think analog photography is coming back now into fashion. In this day and age, we have so much noise doing digital photography. And what I love about analog photography is by removing electronics, it just makes me more present, right? I'm not looking at a screen. I'm looking at things. I'm just observing, and everything I shoot is intentional, right? Yeah. Anyway, just not to riff off on photography, but I think a lot of lessons we need to learn from other fields, especially art. And I was just talking to Gary, and there are a lot of incredible entrepreneurs, that do amazing photography. Gary Tan, from Initialist Capital, he recently bought a Hasselblad. He's just discovering this power of storytelling. A great good friend of mine, as well as an early investor and a big inspiration for me, is Chris Michael, the founder of military.com and Nautilus Ventures, GigaOM, Bujan. There are a lot of incredible founders that found this passion. There's a small community of us in Silicon Valley, and a lot of them shoot film, which is amazing. And and pick whatever your passion is, right? Like, and just run with it and try to find ways that you can align your work and the hobby. You got to be passionate about both, of course, but when you're passionate about two things, when they merge together, it just such a new thing. It's very hard to explain. You just got to feel it.
Awesome. Well, I've got to ask, what are some of your final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Oh boy, final thoughts, huh?
We've been going for quite a while already. It doesn't.
We were jamming. Absolutely loved it.
We covered a lot of good ground here.
Final thoughts. I think a big challenge that we are facing in crypto industry is gross disregard for ethics. It's really sad to see how much people don't care about what's good and bad. I'm not saying this as a saint, but I think there's incredible evidence, and I'm a victim of this. I'm not a victim, but I'm more
you've experienced
upset, right? People copying your stuff, and I think, just a common pattern I've noticed is people raising massive amounts of money from unsophisticated investors by presenting incorrect or misinformed information by through obfuscation. That means putting all the fancy words and putting all the fancy diagrams. It's sort of like following the hype, the trend, and capitalizing themselves with that by essentially what what general people would say lies, and then shifting their strategy is not okay. And I think why that's not okay, because it sets a precedence. It sets a precedence to our generation, our future generation, that this is how people did it, and people think that's okay. On the long term, I don't think it's going to hinder people that took the higher ground, but in the short term, it's definitely a distraction and a nuisance, right? And it's very important for people to have their core beliefs that are rooted in such depth, and that connection of your beliefs to how strong you're connected with is called integrity. The final thoughts would be to not sacrifice your integrity for short-term greed. Integrity. I've lived in Silicon Valley for over 11 years, and this is a magical place because people don't build relationships on transactions. People build relationships, and integrity is cornerstone. You could succeed, you could fail in your current venture, but if you're not ethical, if you're not integral to your core beliefs, you'll never be able to succeed. And it's a very forgiving place, Silicon Valley, to failures. But not a very forgiving place when it comes to integrity. And I think people should remember that. And I'm still great friends with every one of my investors from the beginning, because, having their honest conversations, having their opinions, and never, failure or success, trying to communicate is very, very important. That's really my final thoughts, I think.
Well, and I can tell you, at least from my experience, ultimately, when people do copy you, it's a form of flattery in one way or another. And ultimately, if they can't execute on it, it's not going to matter, because without that integrity, without that passion, without all of the things that we were just talking about, they are not going to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve. They're just trying to achieve short-term goals. At least that's what I've experienced. And I've seen those kinds of people and those kinds of projects fail time and time again. And I've seen the people that pursue the right path, the harder path, and that stick to their integrity, I see those people succeeding more often than not. So,
yeah, I completely agree. I'm not questioning the long-term trajectory, but what I'm concerned really is about these short-term windfalls where you confuse the market, and you ruin it for the rest of us, right? So it's one of those things that people will ultimately realize, and if you have to put timing as everything for a market, yeah, it is what it is. And I think, of course, it is more than anything else. It is flattery, right? Yeah. It's extremely flattery. You can
It's
copy
the
as
cringy flattery, though. It's like, oh, I'm flattered, but like it's also kind of creepy.
it is creepy. I mean, you can copy our code, you can copy our research, but you cannot copy our spirit, right? So that spirit is always going to be with us and with the people that we surround with. So,
well, it's been awesome, Greg, to have you back on the show, and I'm glad that you've been able to get this and make this a reality. Because the last time we talked, I think you were just about to go into your testnet or mainnet, and it's so awesome to follow up a year later and see the progress that you've made, both on a personal level, but also with your projects and your companies as well.
it's an absolute pleasure catching up with you again, and I'm looking forward to seeing the podcast live.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much, Trent.
Thanks for watching another uncensored episode of TechPost.io. I'm your host, Trent Lipinski, and don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that little notification bell next to the subscribe button so that you can get notified when we release new episodes. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, and other social networks, including Twitter and Facebook at TechPost.io, and you can find me personally at Trent Lipinski. Once again, I'm Trent Lipinski, and this has been another great episode of TechPost.io. We'll see you soon.